Unless you can eat in 4 minutes. Oh, let me tell you another thing. When you see this, tonight's event enables to these trees. People from other universities or consortium. So you can position yourself in the limits of the furniture, and you can go around if you go too much on this side, too much on the other side, and they can see all my photos. I learned it tonight. I'm sure you know something, but just say about it. I was doing that. They love it for okay. Let's go. I will just see anybody else's.
Never been there, but
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sabrina do Rosario, and I'm the director of the Community Resilience Hub, which is a department of Kansas Wesleyan that works in the intersection of regenerative agriculture, education, action, and advocacy. And it is our privilege to be close to West Jackson and all the legacy and the history. And this is the second installment of our speaker series called Prairie Conversation with West Jackson and Friends. And we have two locals and very important people that we should all cherish in our land and in our region. And I'm gonna call West Jackson to introduce Stan and get on with the evening. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I didn't know I was going to do this. If I had been given a little more opening, I'd talk for maybe 2 hours and give Stan a chance to say something. Stan Cox is a plant geneticist, so they say. He's, of course, more than that. Takes a half a dozen books in order to get to know more of Stan. And he's been turning them out. He's turning them out, and if you want to bother to check things like the New York Times and stuff, why, you will find stuff in there about Stan. He came to the Land Institute at the turn of this century, and so that'll tell you he's been here a long time. And the sad part of all this is that that time with the Land Institute will end at the end of December. Now, we're also hoping that he'll continue with his assiduous research and thinking and writing. I don't know if I've ever known a person that in having a conversation has no grammatical errors anywhere. And I've never known anyone that if there is a word you didn't know, he would be very polite in letting you know the meaning of that word. This is to say that Stan is a gifted intellectual that has done a lot already in dealing with the issues of our time. So, friend Stan, this better be good.
Well, with Wes having said that, I will say that he and I have a thing that we do pretty much every day, trying to remember the name of a person who from passed on some faculty or some person, and we'll be thinking, and finally one of us, one or the other, comes up with the first name, and then immediately the other one has the last name. So we kind of meet each other for that. And, you'll probably hear a number of grammatical errors talking. I came to the Land Institute in 2000, as Wes said, and we were working as a plant breeder, but we were working on, and then we had other people working on other things, but in the spare time, I was doing a lot of reading and writing about the collision of the climate crisis and ecological breakdown and economic growth. And that was in the early 2000s. We would talk about how, well, it was all about peak oil. Wes and I were pretty confident that the oil was going to run out, and then that will take care of climate change and economic growth was slow and so forth. Of course, we didn't take into account hydraulic fracturing and so forth that came along in around 2009. But all the time we were focused on agriculture. And how many of you have heard Wes at one time or another say something like, if we don't get sustainability in agriculture first, we're not going to get it anywhere else? We've all heard it more than once, and it's true, because the civilization depends on harvesting energy from the sun, having intact ecosystems, and having healthy soils. And if we destroy those last two things, which we're in the process of doing, then it's going to be bad. And then the Land Institute has increasingly in recent years been pushing the idea that perennial agricultural systems can make a big contribution to both reducing the emissions of carbon dioxide that go into the air and to some degree capturing carbon as well. But we also have the problem of the 75% of greenhouse gas emissions that come from the burning of fossil fuels. And if that problem isn't taken care of, if we don't find a way to phase oil, gas, and coal out of our lives, out of our economies, then there are going to be very dire consequences, not only for, in general, for all climate disasters, certainly for food production. So I've been working on not just climate change, because it's just one of the problems that are associated with fossil fuel burning, but been working with, as I said, the collision of ecological problems and economic growth. And and so I have been in 2019, I asked the Land Institute. I had been working in perennial sorghum breeding. I said I'd like to move over into what was then called the Ecosphere Studies program. And so I've been there since then. I turned the sorghum program over to the gifted hands of Fiona and Robert Ballou, who have been working with me in sphere studies, and have been joining with people with the various activists and movements that are looking for ways to phase out oil, gas, and coal. And it's a kind of a difficult thing because in 2019 there was a lot of enthusiasm. It was Green New Deal fever back at that time, and things were going well, and it looked like even though there were big political hurdles, that something would be done about climate. And so then when I moved from sorghum breeding into sphere studies in March of 2020, and I'm guessing that all of you also remember exactly what you were doing and where you were in March of 2020. And COVID blew things up with regard to climate and a lot of other stuff. But since then, there's been very little progress. Even there wasn't before, and there still isn't. There was the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which was hailed as the most consequential climate legislation ever passed in Washington, which says more about the failure of Congress to do anything about climate in the past than it does about the Inflation Reduction Act itself. It's quite weak. And at this point, we have quite poor prospects, but it's still important for us to keep our eyes on what kind of, how thoroughgoing the action has to be to, I haven't even used the microphone.
Oh, the stand, it's not.
Okay. There are proposals for national action to do this, to phase out oil, gas, and coal, and for international initiatives like the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. But with the political situation in not just in the United States but elsewhere being the way it is, and with the economic forces wanting to keep oil, gas, and coal going, we are going to continue to make our greatest progress in agriculture and energy and other things only at the more at local and regional levels. But I think a lot of the leaders, spokespeople in the climate movement are not being frank with the rest of us of how thoroughgoing the transformation is going to have to be. And so I've been working with other people on just envisioning, okay, if we really did get serious about phasing out oil, gas, and coal, at the rate that's going to be necessary, what we have to do. And so, and that tells people, we've planted the flag way out there ahead, and if we go a little way, then maybe that'll help some, but we have to always keep in mind that it's going to take some big changes. Okay, let's see, I think. Okay. So I think we know this, that the history of new energy coming along has been any new energy source that comes along has added to the total energy supply. It hasn't knocked out or displaced the earlier sources of energy. So when in the 1800s coal started being used a lot, it took off, and then when oil in the early 20th century took off, it just kind of parallel coal, but they both kept going up. Then natural gas after World War II got in parallel with them, and these other sources were just getting started, and there's no reason to think that unless we put tight restrictions on the fossil fuels, there's no reason to think that they will be automatically through market forces, etc., will displace the fossil fuels. And given the IPCC and the emissions gap reports from the UN and so forth, this is very rough, but that's about the rate that if we really want to be serious about climate change, oil, gas, and coal have to go down at that precipitous rate. And that certainly isn't going to happen without some very serious policies. Now, what the impression that we get from a lot of the climate movement is that all you do is you build up a lot of renewable energy capacity, and it will automatically displace the fossil fuel. And so as you, and none of these graphs have scales or axis. Well, this one has time, but this is all conceptual. This is what the kind of general idea in the culture of what's going to happen. It's not happening yet. Our oil and gas consumption, I think, this year in the U.S. is the highest it's ever been. My colleague Larry Edwards and I, in 2019, put out this proposal for accomplishing through direct policy that fast phase out of oil and gas and coal, and we've worked hard for a long time to get more interested in it, and we're often told by people in climate movement that's what we need to do, but they say politically we can't accomplish it. But I want to put it out there anyway, so that instead of market forces, you have legal cap on the number of barrels of oil, cubic feet of gas, tons of coal that can come into the economy each year, and be burned or come in through the ports. And it goes down, it may not be exactly linear, but it goes down by a deadline. And that deadline, every year we don't do anything, that deadline gets closer to where we are now. Now, you can't, then renewable energy can start filling the gap, but the rate at which we can build wind and solar capacity and other energy capacity is at this point, because we have to drive out oil, gas, and coal so fast, the buildup of new capacity can't keep pace, and so it'll fill in some of it, but we're going to have a decline in the energy supply. But then eventually, once the fossil fuels are phased out, the continued increase in renewable energy could bring it back up somewhat. And I don't know, like I say, there's no legal axis in it. And it's going to be some, I think that's about 60% of the original energy, but it's probably going to be more than that. We're going to have a society, I say we are, I mean we would if we actually did this, a society that lives on much less energy. And there's plenty of cutting that can be done. So this is all the countries in the world in order from the one with the Lesotho, the country with the lowest per capita energy consumption in the world, up to these. Now, these countries beyond the U.S. Are mostly very small, wealthy countries like Qatar, and then there's Canada and some others, but they're mostly, the U.S. is by far the biggest country with this much energy consumption per capita. Now, it's been calculated on pretty good evidence that this line here is the amount of total energy flowing through an economy that is required, a continuous flow of energy of 1,300 watts to have provide a decent life in that economy. And of course, it varies geographically and so forth. And so, it varies, but it's certainly not we certainly don't need 9,000 watts. Countries like Chile are living pretty close to it, and having most of the country people are living with a very good living standard. Then there are these countries that need more energy to be able to have decent living standards. And so these are the countries that need to have caps and be reducing their fossil fuel consumption very rapidly, and providing aid to other countries to get above this line. And other resources kind of follow this same curve, which is also very similar to the curve for greenhouse gas emissions as well, and for material consumption and other things. We live, as you know, in an extremely unequal world. And since the 90s, in climate, they've been talking about contraction and convergence, meaning get all countries down to a lower level and a more equal level. The other big problem is material footprint. And this is the most amazing thing to me. In around 2020, the Earth or human civilization passed a milestone in which the mass of everything manufactured, constructed, produced by humans came to outweigh the total biomass of the Earth, all living biomass. And now, if you were able to put it all on the scale, it would weigh less than what we mostly extracted from the Earth and built man-made artifacts with. And this, the reason this is a problem, of course, is that the extraction of mineral resources is one of the biggest threats to ecosystems. And the more of this we do, the worse it's going to be. And it's, but the thing, if we're reducing the consumption of fossil fuels and have less energy to work with, that will automatically reduce the ability to produce unnecessary wasteful production, of which there's quite a bit in the rich countries. And so cutting down on fossil fuels will also cut down on our extraction of other resources. And then the other thing is to shift how we get, because if we have fewer resources, to put them where they're needed and not waste them on what's not needed, but a lot of things that actually produce harm. So the kind of example is the U.S. in World War II, when resources were steered, unfortunately, in that case it was steered toward military production and then rationing of gasoline and clothing and so forth. In this case, it would be moving resources toward meeting basic needs and not producing what isn't necessary. Now, where is this growth with the curves of fossil fuels and the tower of human-made material? Where is it going? This 1972, using the clunky mainframe computers of that time, MIT scientists they had they modeled the whole world and put in they did many simulations, which with those computers probably took a long time, and came up with predictions about things like food production, material production, population, etc. And so this was one of their graphs that said, okay, if we proceed with business as usual, and this was just about 50 years ago, they saw food per capita going up, and then here in the 21st century coming down, and the same with industrial output. And then eventually then population would be going down, which the population growth is slowing quite a bit now. But they, in this book, Limits to Growth, they foresaw this. Now you can say, okay, that's some old IBM room-size computers doing that. But just a few years ago, this model was rerun, putting in what has actually happened in the past 50 years, and putting in other parameters regarding what we know a lot more about how these systems work, and they and what they found was that we're pretty much still on that, on the same trajectories. That it seems like everything is increasing, but they said it's not. That they produce graphs and they look very much like this, and showing that, for example, for food, food production is still increasing, but we're right at the point that both the MIT people and these fresh calculations with much better computers have found the same thing. And then this line almost tracks food production, material production, all of whatever is manufactured, constructed, etc. It's also that right around that point. There was a lot of mockery of this study back 50 years ago, and they were kind of just like we were wrong about peak oil in the early 2000s, thinking oil was going to run out. They were too pessimistic about they thought the resources were going to go like this. But even with resources not having gone like that, your models say the same thing, but now what's probably going to do it is what they call pollution, and they included carbon dioxide in there, but we're going to be undermining the Earth systems with greenhouse gas emissions to the point that food and material production will go down if we stay on this is the business as usual path, if we don't do something about this. But now it's time to get Wes up here. For at least the past couple of years, we've been in the classroom there at the Land Institute. A version of this has been on the board. You see it kind of has the shape of those other graphs. But I'm going to call on Wes, but he has things he wants to talk about, but I think they will probably involve this. So we have an artificial blackboard up here. Don't write on it.
Sure, if you don't want to give people a chance to ask you a question.
Right, let's wait until they both.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Stan. We will talk about this. But I have some things to say before we get to that. And I don't know how long it's been since I've given a public talk, but it's been years. And so we'll see how this goes. this is going to be very different than what Stan had to say. Even though we talk almost every day about matters of mutual interest, I thought what I would do tonight is go back to 1970. That was April 22nd, 1970. That was called Earth Day. And I can tell you that the Land Institute was very much involved. There was a march down Santa Fe. There was speeches given on campus out in front of the main building. It was a big moment, and there are a few people here that will remember that time. April 22nd, 1970, Earth Day. What brought it on? Several things, but the Santa Barbara oil spill is one. There were 20 million people in the country that time that joined in on a statement of their concern. There were nationwide tens of thousands of sites that people set up, and the discussion was spirited. Here at KWU, this was a very hot space. And it wasn't just the marching down Santa Fe and the statements. There was a spirited engagement on the part of the students at Kansas Wesleyan. January the 6th, 1971, as a result of the help of three members that were students in biology, they helped me put together one of the first environmental books, Man in the Environment. Only two things wrong with the title. But it was a great moment for all of us to finally see that something was happening about the environment. Well, what happened? So I'm going to jump forward now to from 1970 to 1976. I'd been away a while, and the Land Institute was started that year. And then from 1976 to 2024, here we are, 48 years, 48 years. And what happened? What happened? I think it's easy to say, in some respects, nothing happened. But a lot of things were in the process of a kind of a happening. Well, if the happening becomes a happen, what are we supposed to expect by this time? Well, 48 years later, here we are, and 54 and a half years after Earth Day, April 7th, we have to ask ourselves the question, why did we fail? We have failed on almost every essential score. Why? Well, one thing is that we did not know the history of who we are as humans. We did not know what it meant to be Homo sapien, that it spent 200,000 years before Homo sapiens started agriculture 10,000 years ago. We didn't know about who we were as creatures of the Upper Paleolithic. We did not know about the nature of the human. We were so busy being involved in what we like to call the advancement of civilization. And the subject for me is the advancement of civilization. What do we mean by that? Where did we get that idea of the advancement of civilization? So, one of the biggest things is that we did not know the imperative of highly dense carbon. We did not know the problem of saying no to it. So what did we do? We had wind machines. We had them at the Land Institute. We had solar collectors. We had them at the Land Institute. We had little gardens out there for interns. We also were involved in a research program. But it's as though we had no wits about us. And we did the third thing. Well, one is we didn't know we didn't know who we were. And we didn't know the importance of highly dense carbon. And now the third one is we adopted a mantra of technological fundamentalism. That's all it's going to take. Look how clever we are. All right, so those are the three things. So, well, who are we? And I've been asked recently, so Wes, you've been to Europe, huh? Yeah, I've been to Europe a time or two. Would you like to go again? It'll be all right, I guess. Where would you go if you wanted to go somewhere? I said I would go to Africa. Why to Africa? I would go to where Homo sapien was until 60,000 years ago and try to get a sense of what was at work in the selection of the Darwinian approach to the creation of various creatures. You mean go there? Why wouldn't you go to where agriculture had its beginning? Well, that's where the problem was. Why should we go there? How about us setting ourselves to getting an understanding of what was shaping us during all those periods of the Pleistocene, and what happened finally at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, where it's drying out at the end of the Pleistocene, and where the greatest group of
revolutionaries to ever live began that journey. What about before that? We kind of know what happened with that. What happened, of course, not only agriculture and the soil erosion that goes with it. 5,000, so this is 10,000 before present. 5,000 years ago, where were we? Well, we were learning about metals. We really got into those metals. We got tired of fooling around with bones and so on. And then came a time. And that time, and now I'm going to show you, Stan likes me to show this. So, you hold your arms out here. I do this all the time for a lot of people. I stop them downtown and say, I want you to put your arm up. And from here on down, all the way along the floor, that is Homo sapien. But right here is 10,000 years ago. And right here, at this joint, that's the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. And right out here on the end is a little thing sticking out. That's the Industrial Revolution. We can't bite it off. We can only suck on it and try to make it grow or find more of it. So, here we are. We come along this way. This isn't quite the way we had it, but it's good enough. But here's where Stan stops. He stops right there. And he's doing good stuff. Don't worry about that. He's working on this. But then here it's either going down this way, or it's going down this way, or it's going down this way, or it's going down this way. We don't know the rate of which it's going to go down.
Wes, is that human population? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about human population and other things. All right, so we don't know the rate or what. But what we know is we're not going to give up on highly dense carbon. It will go as long as it's available. Well, then there's something else out there. And I've had lots of suggestions as to the something else out there. I won't get into all those suggestions now, but I want to, in a way, digress. And I want to talk a little more about that highly dense carbon, that too much is being ignored. So I want to tell you a little story about 1859. In 1859, three things happened. John Brown was hanged at Harper's Ferry. Too bad about that. There was also, in 1859, probably the most important scientist to give us a sense of the how and the why and the who of everything is Charles Darwin. It's amazing when people learn that the citric acid cycle in some tiny little insect that we're willing to swat, some little insect has the same citric acid cycle as us and as all the creatures. We are all related. We are all related. And, but also in 1859, at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, a man by the name of Colonel Drake drilled an oil well. And it was the first one to be drilled, and from that oil was then dispersed across the United States. Now, 1859, you see, yeah, well, that was a long time. That's 165 years ago. Huh. Yeah, that was a long time ago. Well, let me tell you how long ago 165 years was. 3 of my grandparents were alive, and one of them was in utero when Drake drilled that oil well. 2 of those held me on their lap when I was a baby. 2 of them. Now, what is it about Homo sapiens that causes us to not be able to think and feel about 3 generations? Well, because back in that period when we're becoming creatures of the Upper Paleolithic, Homo sapien, we didn't have to, because we died in plenty of time, and we still don't pay much attention to what 3 generations is. And so, that's a long time ago. So in 1859, how much carbon do you think was in the atmosphere? Well, it was 240 parts per million. Now, 50 years later, in 1909, there were 2 men that came up with what became the most important invention of the 20th century. Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch learned how to turn atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. And from an existential point of view, that was the most important invention of that century. How many parts per million was it from 1859 to 50 years later, 1909? 20. But now let's go to 1959, and what is it? Remember, 1859 it was 280. 50 years later, 300. 1959, 315. And in 2009, 387. And just today I looked at 2024, 426.7 parts per million. Now, that's all this side of 4 grandparents of mine. That needs to be thought about, of the speed at which this is all happening. So, I got a whole bunch of things here. So, what do we need to do? We're obviously not going to stop drilling for oil. We're obviously not going to do that. And I've spent some time in the last couple of years trying to study the journey from minerals to cells. You've got that carbon is there and it's going to stay there. We got to have it. So we're not going to get rid of oil, and we're not probably going to get rid of coal, and we're probably not going to get rid of natural gas. What are we going to do? Well, Bob Jensen and I did a book, and we said it's going to go down. It'll just go down. And there'll be fewer people and less stuff. Well, you can imagine what most people say. Oh my golly, that's such a downer. Can't you give me something positive? And the problem is we've been getting too many things positive. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a way to begin to think, creatively, and actually find it somewhat satisfying. So where do you begin? Well, let's begin right here at Kansas Wesleyan. You folks know what these young folks are starting up with, about a half a dozen folks. They acknowledge one big thing. You gotta eat, and you gotta learn how to grow food, and you gotta learn how to process it, and you gotta learn how to, have clothing and shelter. And so now there's a program here at Kansas Wesleyan where there is within an institution that is of liberal arts is also having this engagement with food and clothing and shelter. That's a real beginning. That's a real beginning for young people. Now, I got much more to say here, but what I would like to have is a conversation. Bob Jensen and I, when we did our book, Inconvenient Apocalypse, my golly, everybody thought that we slit our throats, and everybody else would want to slit their throats too, because there's nothing. But what we're finding is folks are saying, yeah. And so there's getting to be more folks willing to rethink and start with, who are we? How did we get here? What was it that was going on as this selection was happening on this earth? What was it that was happening? And is there not a life for us there? And we can take some good things with us. The physicists have given us a different heaven than anything was ever available. We've got a different heaven now. And we've got lots of knowledge. Now, maybe we can begin to think of this next future, not in the terms of back there in 1970, but begin to think of this new future in different ways that are just as satisfying, with fewer people, less stuff. And that's a different kind of a beginning than what we started out for on this journey, starting with agriculture. So I'm willing to stop. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that, but I don't want any senile rapture here. I think Stan and I can, as they say, take it from here. We got another hour, and maybe we'll say something that's interesting enough that they'll stick around.
I'll see that.
Yeah, well, yeah. Stan, you got some more stuff to show?
No.
Okay. All right. You first.
What?
You first. Anybody?
Yeah.
Anybody have a comment or a question?
So these graphs are projecting this loss of population. Do you have ideas of how that's going to happen?
I do. Less food. And they're getting to be more that want fewer children. And they're getting to be more that don't even want to get married. There's getting to be more for less. That's some kind of a tendency. What I'm saying is that what we have been doing has been almost all wrong. And that's been all of my years from the age of 30. It's almost all wrong.
And so why the food production decline?
Why is what?
Why the food production decline that kicks off the population decline?
Why did the food?
Why would the food production decline?
Yeah, you.
We've built food systems to be very much dependent on industrial inputs and fossil fuel use. Fossil fuels would probably be the last, if we really were to phase them out, agriculture would probably be one of the last places that's going to need that, because if you're going to be tilling and pulling heavy equipment and so forth, then things like batteries and biodiesel are not going to be adequate. But the biggest thing that answer your question is nitrogen fertilizer. As Wes said, in 1909, these German guys figured out how to, with very high temperatures, natural gas, and very high pressure, to get the atmospheric nitrogen atoms to combine with hydrogen atoms to make methane, and from there to make ammonia, and from there to make, well, at the time it was for making explosives, but it turned out to be the key to increasing agricultural production. And one of the, Václav Smil, one of the great analysts of all of this stuff, estimates that 40% of the nitrogen atoms in each of our bodies right now came through that industrial process. They were, until 1909, those atoms had never been in the life cycle. Well, some of them had for lightning and so forth, but the industrial production of nitrogen fertilizer, in essence, allowed the world population to be 40% higher than it would have been without it. And so you can say a lot of hunger was averted, but also there would not have been as many people. And if we're in a world where industrial production is declining, then it means that food supply is going to be declining. The idea is that we need to be scrambling to be developing new agricultural systems that are not as dependent on industrial production, which means a whole lot more people involved in producing food as back in our history that was the case. What do you think?
Well, if we really wanted to how do you see, or what mechanisms do you see for decreasing fossil fuel production and decreasing the carbon being loosened in the atmosphere and circulation? I mean, fossil fuel production keeps going up, and it peaks every year, and they say, oh no, we can't do that again, but we do it.
Well, there are, I think, 1,000 or so scientists and climate people have signed a proposal for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which would be modeled. And I'm not saying this is the answer, but this is an example. It's modeled on the nuclear non-proliferation treaty that whole thing started in the 60s, in which the nuclear powers got countries who didn't have nuclear weapons to sign on to it, agreeing that in return for not developing nuclear weapons, that they would receive assistance in developing nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. So the analogy would be that on the world's high emitting countries, which mainly means the rich countries and the really large countries, would commit to reducing their use of fossil fuels within their countries by a certain amount, and would be held to that. And then the second part of it, they would also be assisting low-income countries with who like those on the graph, who need more energy, assisting them with developing non-fossil energy sources rather than depending on fossil fuels. Now, it's that thing. I mean, there's a lot of buzz about it and a lot of support for it in the climate community, but of course, it's not being proposed and debated in the UN or anything like that. But if we had that, or if at least groups of countries agreed among themselves to do it, then the kind of cap and adapt thing that I was talking about, that within countries, that's how it would need to be done. And of course, all of this is politically unlikely. I think that it's really hard to get the population angry at carbon dioxide emissions. I think that making the oil and the fossil fuel companies the villains is going to be a much more direct way to do it, to go after them and say, we're going to cap you, we're going to cut. Right now, one reason that fossil fuel use is going up is that the federal government provides billions of dollars in subsidies to them rather than penalizing them for it. And so it's going to take a combination of things, I think, and I agree with Wes. It's I'm afraid it's not all that likely, but the more we can reduce the use, we may never get to zero, but the more that it can be reduced, the lower temperatures will be decades from now. Let's see, did I see? That changed.
What do you think about the advent of AI and their proposal to power that through nuclear power, and where that puts the future of energy production and usage?
The social philosopher Thorstein Veblen a century ago inverted what Plato had once said and said invention is the mother of necessity, and AI is a very good example of that. The world doesn't need it. It's the last thing we need to be doing is to be figuring out ways to feed it the quantity of the huge quantity of energy that it's going to require. But now you've got Microsoft funding the reopening of one of the 3 Mile Island reactors to do this. And for so many reasons, nuclear energy is a disaster, and to be using it to fuel a technology that one of the leading developers of it has said, well, yeah, there's a chance that it will be the end of civilization, but we have to take it because we have to take that chance because we've invented this thing. So it's that and cryptocurrency could totally break it's no exaggeration, totally break the national grid. There's a lot of these data centers in kind of the epicenters in Northern Virginia, and they've already one coal-fired power plant in West Virginia and another in Maryland that were scheduled by now to be decommissioned have been kept going just to get that get more power to Northern Virginia to run these data centers. So, sorry, you triggered me talking about AI.
If we were to say to one another, Environmental 101 is over, it failed. There is so little to offer coming out of that 54-year period. Now what? And if we were to begin to think about who we were before we became a species out of context, we may begin to discover some things about us. And little things that come up. For instance, if there is some kind of a statement that has to do with something that causes you to shed some tears, where did that come from? Was that on the Upper Paleolithic? Was that something that was important? Or what about the looking at the very large number of people that go to stadiums? What is it about those stadiums that causes people to want to be there and to try to do an analysis of that? Everybody won't do it, but a lot of people do that type of thing. So I think that we're not looking enough into our past and trying to imagine what is it that we like, what is it that feels good, what is it that causes some folks, like the farmer who was working in his field and he saw
within a half a mile, his barn was on fire. And he kept on working. And then he went home and he had ashes. What did he have? What was it about him that recognized there's no use trying to do anything about that fire? I got something to do here. And then you begin to think differently about yourself, about your place, about what really counts. We see that sort of thing happen in families in which there is something seriously wrong, and they work ways out. If we were to begin to try to formalize some of that, we may discover that we're already working in the upper Paleolithic. But we're not going to get this out of Washington. We're not going to get it out of probably very many college professors, although there may be a few. Where are we going to look when what is before us is not working? Where do we look? And I think, we have at the Land Institute, we had Leland Lorenzen that would come around that got by on, $500 a year. What was it about him? Some kind of an anomaly? Yeah, but what was it? Start asking questions about odd things and see to what extent we might be into something. But it seems to me, the last half century has led to awful close to zero. We come up with brilliant talk. Boy, do we like to talk.
Wes,
Yeah.
I have a curiosity. Or maybe it's a question for Stan and then start there. When you showed the 1972 MIT study, I wonder if that was cited in the Brundtland Commission, Our Common Future report, because wasn't that at the same time, or am I confusing my dates?
Yeah, the Brundtland Commission was quite a bit later.
Oh, okay. That was just a curiosity, and I think maybe I want to make a confession here. I've been around Wes more and more, and the first time he told me this and made me do this, I thought, maybe he's exaggerating a little bit. I guess I went in denial. And maybe we have more time, and maybe that's not going to be such a steep curve, and it's going to take us, we're going to have some time. And so when we start thinking, when is energy going to decline? When is food production going to decline? And when is population going to decline? We are relying on non-renewable sources. So I think we have 60 years of coal left. And then when we talk about food, we have less than 60 years of topsoil left. And then if we talk about people, we saw that because the ocean is warmer in the Mexican Gulf, then we had all the hurricanes that hit Florida and North Carolina. Then you see the floods in Valencia. And then you also see all the wars that are really ultimately about resources. So I think we are already seeing this happen, but it's so hard to grasp. Wow, this is really happening. And there are conventions and the Sustainable Development Goals that were ratified by all the countries that we were supposed to work on the Sustainable Development Goals between 2020 and 2030. And I wonder sometimes if we should just be less globalized and more rooted, because I feel very difficult to hold all the bad news that now I can get from all over the world. I I was kind of praying this morning. I can't hold all this and be okay. I'm not okay. And so maybe what we need to do is to look to our own community and our own soil, in our own prairie, and what is it that I can do here to help the people that are close to me. So those are my thoughts, and I didn't want anybody to leave here thinking, oh my God, they're so negative, or this is not really gonna happen. And it's so hard to understand that this is all going to fall. It's already falling. But how do we grasp with that? And how do we transform that in some action to help our neighbor?
And that's one of the points, that the conclusion we draw from all of this is that efforts like community resilience hub, as you said, local, regional action is something that we can do something about ourselves to kind of shift toward going ahead and adapting to the environmental and economic changes that are coming, rather than thinking that we can control events in Washington and Brussels and Beijing. The big obstacle to this the local effort to try to prevent runaway climate change is, Serena, you have applied it, competition, economic competition between countries. Nobody's want to do it first because make them less competitive. And it's the old, you go first, no, you go first thing. And we have very little power to do anything around that. We can do stuff here.
I have a short poem, 3, 6, 9 lines from Wendell Berry. It is hard to have hope. It is harder as you grow old. For how must not depend on feeling good. For hope must not depend on feeling good. And there is the dream of loneliness at absolute midnight. You also have withdrawn belief in the present reality, in the future, which surely will surprise us. And hope is harder when it cannot come by prediction, any more than by wishing. But stop dithering. The young ask the old to hope. What will you tell them? Tell them at least what you say to yourself. Now, after that poem, Jensen wrote this: if there is a path forward, it requires us to face our worst fears of the future and then speak of them fearlessly. So, what can seem so awful has within it some kind of, I think, growth that we have been holding off of because we want to continue to feel good. That's a hard thing to sell. But, anyway, you would want to say something.
Wes, you said it far better than I had. I was digging through old ugly readers and found the fall 2015 issue whose cover read audibly on on a screen as a visual, said, "Curtain call, how to graciously accept our inevitable extinction." So I think that's a joyful thought to work from. But again, I'm echoing what you and Wendell and what said so well. I think that we need to make a profession of saying to people around us who are dithering, not being panicked, but saying to them, you need to look realistically at what's going on. Stop lying to yourself, stop buying the lies that you're being fed every day, stop echoing, pick out your falsehood, because there are plenty of them out there. You need to face the music. This is what it is. I hope you'll join me.
There was a question on the live stream. Can I go ahead and read it?
Yes.
Sure.
If the path forward is consuming less, this is counter-consumerism and would face a strong headwind in our culture of addiction to stuff. Should a consumption tax replace income tax?
Should a consumption tax replace income tax? Well, it's a huge share of the both greenhouse gas emissions and other environmental damage is done by the richest people, both globally and within countries. So things like a highly progressive income tax and wealth tax, those kind of things are necessary. And consumption tax, it would be, a carbon tax would be kind of a form of consumption tax. There are a lot of problems with trying to reduce emissions by through economic mechanisms like taxes, etc., and especially with inequality and those kind of things tend to hurt people with least money. Now in our Larry's and my cap and adapt plan, where you're directly suppressing the supply instead of, in this case, of fossil fuels, but that kind of suppresses the supply of everything. That is, it causes, if there's nothing else done, it causes problems because there may be scarcity of basic goods because the smaller amount of resources are being used to build yachts or whatever. So you have to have a way of directing the resources toward basic needs, and then to keep inflation from going out of control, you've got to have price controls. And if you have price controls to prevent scarcity, you have to have rationing. That's exactly what happened during World War II. Polls toward the end of World War II showed that people, because they were in an emergency, when they saw that they were getting everything they needed and their neighbors were getting what they needed, rationing was pretty popular. There were stories in the paper about rich people trying to buy cheese under the table and so forth, and so people got a kick out of that. But people were saying, if anything, well, there's other stuff you need to ration that too. Now, that was a different era. I very much doubt people would go for rationing now, but dealing with quantities of stuff rather than dollar values is the way to suppress consumption.
I got a question. Wes, I just want to ask you, what do you think? What's your opinion? Why did your neighbor that lived on $500 a month, why did he choose that simple life? You were asking us that this is something we need to examine. What do you think?
Well, Leland lived 30 miles south of us, and for your information, the shack that he lived in, we moved up to the Land Institute.
Right.
And I guess you can go in and see what's going on in there. But Leland had spent time 7 years at sea. And he went to a lot of different countries. And he concluded that there are two kinds of economies. There's the formal economy, and then there's a real economy on the wharf and other places. I've heard of others say something similar to that. He came back to the United States working in McPherson at the foundry, at the not the foundry, but the
Refinery?
what?
Refinery.
Yeah, refinery. And he read Thoreau, and he decided his life was going to change. Now, it took a while for him to get on that journey, but in the course of that journey, he was studying the likes of Thoreau and others. He would go to the library, bring home 6 books, read them, take them back, get 6 more, and so on. But he, at one point, came to a conclusion where violence begins. And he said, violence begins when you start seeking pleasure. He said, there's nothing wrong with the experience of pleasure, but when you seek it, that's when the violence begins. And when I first knew him, he had the most beautiful raised bed garden. Beautiful. And he decided that too was pleasure seeking. And he quit the garden. And then it was living off the greens in the yard. He had a goat, and he made a go of it. And he tried, when we were building part of the Land Institute, I tried to pay some money, like I had $20 on me. He says, no, I don't want that. I tried to give him 5. I said, look, I can afford it. He said, don't give me your problems. He saw that that was the beginning of problems. So that journey that he took was, I don't know anybody else that would have said the seeking of pleasure is the beginning of violence. But if that worked for him, what is it about someone? And here's what he said repeatedly. He came a lot of when we had interns there. They'd ask him questions about why does he do this and so on. he would say every time, I do this because it's easy. Now, he had worked his way on a journey. That's not that everybody can go be like him, but everybody could maybe go and be something else that is of less consumptive. So, to know that there are such people around. What's another one? The couple that lived in a boat. The Nearings too. Yeah, I mean, in fact, why not have a course? Why not have lots of courses on all of these odd people? And try to get a sense of what it was. I went quite a few little trips with Leland to look at the groups of people that had dropped out, had their masters from Berkeley or there's something from here or something from here, and it was fascinating to see that drop-out economy. But most of them could not stay with it. And what was missing? Well, we don't know. But that would be something for people to look into. What's wrong with us trying to think of a way that is like a Leland or that other couple that lived along the Ohio River? What?
Is it the Nearings?
No, not Nearings.
Oh, Nearings.
Anyway, there are plenty of folks that have done these odd things that I think it's worth us looking into that realm instead of trying to find some other little thing here and there and find out that it doesn't work either. So that's the only thing I can think of. I cannot think of any real solutions that have to do with the extractive economy.
Wes, I just remember 50 years ago when the Prairie Festival was during one of your speeches, you said we need to emulate Cleveland and not Donald Trump.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
50 years ago? And that's the wisdom of Solomon.
So Wes, you said that looking back, you feel like the environmental movement has done very little that was effective, right? So what has been effective in your opinion?
What has been effective?
Yeah.
Well, I think there are more people now that have gained some sensibility that recycling is not all that hard. You know, there's one. There are any number of folks that I would say have a moral standing in the world as a result of their having paid attention to the movement, even though the movement has not happened. It's just, and look, we got wars and rumors of wars and a lot of other things that we're constantly worried about. And I think, well, after I give a talk sometime, there would frequently be the question, do you have hope? And I would say something like, well, there's so many good people working in the sustainability movement, and I would go on like that. But I never felt like I was giving them the whole treatment. And That had to stop. You know, that just has to stop. I mean, there are all sorts of things that just need to stop and that are so unnecessary. So, I'm a happy person until I think. You know, until you begin to think, that's when. But thankfully, we're not always thinking. And so there's plenty of room to be happy if you got your mind shut down. I mean, look what's going on in Israel now, and all of that. How can anybody be anything?
How about you, Stan? Do you have an answer to that question? That has anything been effective in the last 50 plus years?
Right? The environmental movements. I think that they, along with just economics, did play a part in preventing the proliferation of nuclear energy.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
You were part of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The Land Institute opposed the building of the power plant. We had one of our interns that laid herself across the tracks when they were delivering the vessel. I mean, we did that stuff. And we had lectures right in here about these various things. And, you know, I've seen Marty Bender staring out of this room just a little short of swearing over senses of oughtness and so on. I mean, there's been a lot of fire around this place in the past, and at the land.
In the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, there's a lot less air and water pollution, and then when they discovered that CFC refrigerants were destroying the ozone, that has pretty much been taken care of. But all of those problems are about specific, very specific problems. You get down to the chemical compound, and they are all are all issues that are substances or things for which there's a safer substitute, or things that you can clean up and so forth. And that's where carbon dioxide and methane and so forth are such a problem, and why nothing gets done about climate is that we've built everything around us now is a result of basically a century-long fossil fuel bonanza, and the world would look nothing like it does around us right now if we hadn't had it, and we wouldn't have built ourselves into a corner building in air conditioning is the best example, or where we built a whole built environment that depends on air conditioning, and we've built a transportation system around the private automobile that are very hard to back out on. So that's why climate is, and a lot of the other ills that have been caused by fossil fuels. It's hard to do anything about those because we built our economy to be dependent
Yeah.
I was wondering where you thought the fire went to.
Where at what?
Where'd the fire go?
Where did the fire go?
Yeah, why aren't all these students out here protesting, getting with it, and doing the things that you used to see?
Well, for one thing, we were all more optimistic than we deserved to be. And so we thought we could whip this one, you know. Well, and then of course we saw what happened. There was Vietnam, there was other things going on. Look, this isn't the worst that we've faced. I mean, think of the likes of a Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment, and think about those folks and what they went through.
Yeah.
I'm going to read just a tiny bit of Dostoevsky now. If you do not attain happiness, always remember that you're on the right road. And try not to leave it. Above all, avoid falsehood, every kind of falsehood, especially falseness to yourself. Watch over your own deceitfulness and look into every hour, every minute. Avoid being scornful, both to others and to yourself. What seems to you bad within you will grow pure from the very fact of your observing it in yourself. Avoid fear, too, though fear is only the consequence of every sort of falsehood. Never be frightened at your own faint-heartedness in attaining love. Don't be frightened overmuch, even at your evil actions. And then he says, I am sorry. I can say nothing more consoling to you. For love in action is a hard and dreadful thing compared with love in dreams. And we ended that book. Love does not make the world go round. That's physics. The world could go round without us. But love is essential to how we humans go round in this world for as long as we have left. So we end on what we believe is the most upbeat note possible, offering a strong endorsement of love in action, requiring that in our moment, in history, that love is bound to be harsh and dreadful, but it's still love. How can it be better? So, I'm hoping that we can begin a journey of real inquiry. And I'm sorry for ourselves for having taken the easy road. Your turn.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm opening here to say that the next, I'm finding it in my calendar, when the next Prairie conversation is going to be. It will be in February 26th of next year, and I can't confirm. I have one name confirmed. I'm gonna wait till the second name, but please come back. Let's keep thinking and honoring such special people that we have here. Thank you so much. please take some more snacks, take some to them home. We have a lot of food. Grab something on your way out.
Thank you.